for joining us today. So this presentation today is, I'll first start off giving you a bit of background to IrriSAT and how it works. And then Max is going to help you set up the field for yourselves. And then I'm going to go through some of the tools that you can use through IrriSAT. And then we're going to pass over to Stephen, who's going to give you a summary of how he's been using IrriSAT and what he's found useful so far. All right. So what's IrriSAT? In its most basic form, IrriSAT is specialized satellite imagery. So this is imagery that's taking photos not just in the visible light spectrum, but also into the near infrared and infrared. And it's also incorporating information from weather stations. And this combined together is put into a cloud-based program, which gives us information on plant health and water use. So IrriSAT can do a number of things. Perhaps its most valuable use is in looking at field variability. So you can see in this image here, quite distinct variation in how a crop is performing over an area. It can be used to estimate crop water use, which is what we see in this graph here. That's daily crop water use in millimeters. It can give us a 7-day forecast for ETO. It gives a seasonal water use report, so you can look back at how much water your crop has used over a season and compare that to what you might have put on. And it can also be used to assist in irrigation scheduling. So the information comes from 2 satellites. First one is Sentinel-2. So this satellite has a 10-meter pixel resolution and returns to the same spot every 2 to 5 days. So we get weekly updates on crop health. It also uses data from Landsat 7 and 8. So Landsat 8 is the one that's still going now. It has a slightly lower resolution, a 30-meter pixel resolution, and a longer revisit. So it doesn't come by as frequently. But the reason we have 2 is in the event that there's poor visibility one day, it will switch to the Landsat satellite. So it's kind of like a backup for Sentinel-2. But another benefit of using the Landsat 7 and 8 data is that it gives us data back to the year 2000. So we can actually look at how crop health has changed or seasonal water use has changed throughout time. So what it's doing is when the satellite passes over, they're taking images of the land surface in very specific bands of the electromagnetic spectrum. And it's calculating the NDVI, the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index, which looks at reflectance in the near infrared band and the red band. So plants that are really healthy absorb almost all the visible light and all the visible red light, and they reflect a pretty large proportion of near infrared light. And plants that are unhealthy reflect more visible light and less near infrared light. So we use this relationship to calculate this index, which tells us how healthy a plant is. So because this is directly related to the greenness and amount of biomass there is, it can actually convert it into a crop coefficient. And we can use crop coefficients then to calculate water use. And this is done using this equation. So we take the reference water use from weather station data and multiply that by the crop coefficient for your crop, and that'll give you the estimated daily water use. So we already know crop coefficients on a monthly basis for most crops, but the benefit of using IrriSAT is that it captures this variability that we see in fields. So normally we'd have one crop coefficient for each month throughout the year. But the reality is that for sites of the same crop, so these are all wine grapes, we're seeing a huge spread in the crop coefficient values for that same time of year. So the benefit of using a program like IrriSAT is it's giving you information that's completely specific to your field. So this is again just highlighting how useful it is for the crop variation. So in this image, this patch here, the reason this variation was the way it is because the laterals were too long in the drip line, and so the water wasn't getting down to this end of the patch. But they weren't really noticing this until they looked at the satellite imagery. And here we have young vines. So because there's less biomass, we have a lower crop coefficient, less green vegetation. And up here there were sprinklers, so different system. There could be soil constraints, which might be the reason why there's poor performance. But it's a pretty useful tool if you want to start thinking about where is the variation in my field, and then start delving into, well, why am I seeing that kind of variation? So IrriSAT's just the surface of what's out there in terms of remote sensing. NDVI is only one aspect we can calculate as well. So there's been an increase in using drones and planes to capture data because they can get information at a higher resolution again. A drone can get down to the centimetre scale in terms of, what it's capturing, which can be really useful if you want to monitor each individual plant instead of a whole 10 by 10 metre pixel. And you can calculate different kinds of indices, which might be more useful if you're looking at nitrogen content, for example. So there's a whole world of really cool remote sensing information out there if you're interested in it. But for now, we're just focusing on IrriSAT because it's free and it's something that you can use, and the information is updated weekly. So you're getting very close to real-time data delivered straight to you. Does anyone have any questions so far? No? All good. Okay. So I'm going to pass over to Max and she's going to get you set up. So if you are working on one screen, you might want to keep us on Zoom. What are we on Teams on one side of your screen. So if you want to split your screen, grab the top of the Teams, make it smaller. Oh, hang on, let me just change my screen for you. Here we go. So you got your screen here. Click and drag to the top, move it over to one side and you'll see a shadow pop up. Let go and then click the other screen you want beside it. So just get up Chrome or whatever browser you want to use. So then you can have both on either side. So you can watch Max explain here and have your browser up there if that's easier for you.
So just give us a hoy when you're ready, okay? Because we don't want to go up, we don't want to start and someone isn't there yet, please.
Andrew? I'm ready, Max.
Okay, that's Andrew. John, you right? Because we really want you to be able to do this while I show you, because you're good, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Everyone else?
Yeah, I think I've got another section up, Max, so we'll give it a try.
Okay then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm good, Max.
All right then. Okay. Well, what we're going to do, if Nat can just go to the next slide, because it's actually got the web address and it's easier to see. So where you type in, it says irrisat-cloud.appspot.com. If you would do that for me, please, and then I'm going to show you it on my screen. Okay. All right, this giant big thing there. So how are you going with that? You should get something that looks like this. It might look a little bit different because they've all got different size screens, and because this was developed by John Hornbuckle for the cotton industry, it comes up around Moree, Goondiwindi, those sort of places, the cotton, you know, it's really heavily into cotton. So everyone got that in there? They got their irrisat.cloud-cloud.appspot.com, and you come in with this. So if you can go over to the top right and it says sign in with Google. If you've got a Gmail account, please use it. If you don't, it's idiot proof. It will actually walk you through in a couple of steps to set up your own. Now, I'm hoping Stuart dropped your books off, because on just inside the front cover of the book, we've got a spot there for you to write. If you've got to make a new Gmail account, write down what you called yourself and your password. Because there's nothing worse than forgetting it and then having to set up another one, says the person who knows all about that. All right, so if you've signed in, everyone okay with that? Just give me a hoy when you're ready, please.
Right, Max.
Thanks, Andrew. I think David was
I'm
still
good to go.
working. Okay.
Yeah, I'm signed in now.
Thanks. Anyone not signed in yet?
Yeah, I'm not yet. I'm having a little bit of trouble, but keep going. I'll catch up.
All right. Yeah, well, you look young and okay with that. Now, what I need you to do, because obviously you can grab the screen and pull it over and everything, but the easiest way to go is down here where the minus is, and I call it Litlify. I'm really good at this computer game, not. So if you make it smaller with that, and then with the left button down on your mouse, grab that over, and I'm assuming we're all around about the Mildura area that you're interested in. If there's somewhere else you want to go, put that in the middle of the screen, and then go back here and bigify it. All right, until you can find your property. All right. Now, I haven't signed in yet because I automatically come back to Mildura, and if I just clicked on, it would have automatically brought me back here. All right. So when you've got your property big enough that you can actually draw around it, so I'll go here to work. Okay. All right, so make it so that that's department there, so that if you wanted to draw around that, it's big enough that you could actually do that. Now I'm just going to go sign in with Google, and it's going to just drag me there. But what I would like you to do is, when you've got your property in the middle of there, see this eye up here? If you just go on that little arrow just to the right of the eye and drop that down, it says set current view as default. So every time you sign in, it will automatically come to your property. So you don't have to start in Moree every single time. Does that make sense? So set that and go there.
Max, for people that might have their screen split, they may have noticed that that little eye is perhaps hidden behind the sign out from Google because it squashes it up a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
But no, I've just realised it because I'm following along as you're going. It will be tucked in behind there. It's probably not critical at the minute to worry about it.
But as I said, that means that when you do sign in, as I said, if you can set it as your default, you won't have to do that Litlify, bigify everything every single time. This is technical computer talk, I know, but we'll get there. All right. So now what I would like you to do is just click Sentinel-2 up in that top. Can you see this thing where it says maps? Oh, this is just showing that we had a cloudy day the last time it went over. Great. I might just go back. If it's cloudy for you, and it should be, if we just go back to, hopefully there weren't clouds on the 13th of March. So you've got a clear image there. If you can go when there's no clouds, because it's you can't, if you can't see your property, you can't draw around it. So if you can see your property, so just go on that top left, go back to a date when you can actually see things. And if you click the NDVI, I'll just make mine bigger. Then when you go to draw around, oops, sorry, mine's just updating. You can see how big these pixels actually are. So when you go to draw around a property, if you're drawing around a very small thing, the chances are if the edge of the property went through there, let's say, you're going to start getting roads and things. And of course, roads don't have a very good NDVI and near infrared stuff. And so they won't be wrong, but they won't, your results won't be wrong, but they won't be as right as they could be. So if you can make those, turn the NDVI on, all right, and I'm just going to go to a new property that I haven't done before, because I've done nearly everything at work. This here, I don't know whether you can see my hand, but now the base photo doesn't get updated. It's only the NDVI and near infrared that gets updated every 2 to 5 days. So you might have replanted, but that may not show up. But the NDVI and the near infrared will actually it'll show there, but maybe not in your base photo. So what I need you to do now is, can you see where it says My Fields? Can you see that little plus sign? If you would click on that plus sign and then come down to your property on the corner, and if you click on the corner of your property that I don't know whose this one is, and go around, oops, oh, I've got Woodsy's Gem Shop, get rid of that. And then when you're ready to complete that whole property, if you come back to the first one that you did, if you double click on that, it will automatically join the dots for you. Oh, I've got someone's house, but that doesn't matter. You just get the idea. So if you can give me a hoy when you're ready with that, please. If you've got any problems, just yell, and I talked through someone who was in their 80s with this over the phone the other day, so I'm sure you're going to be great. He was a bit worried with those little red dots that came up. He was worried he had blood spots on his screen. All right, how are you going? Have you got your property on there? Drawn around the edge, double clicked at the first one again.
Yeah, I've got a line around my, I think most of my property.
Yeah, well, now you can do your whole property, or if you want to, let's say that this was my young vines and that's a patch of something else and something else. You can come back and put them in as patches. But as I said, at the moment, we'll go with whatever you want. Now, when you've gone all the way around and you've double clicked back there and the red line's gone all the way around, if you come up into where it says field name and write what you call that. So, you know, I could just call it, you know, I'll call it who knows. All right. And then just click that add button. Now, forevermore, that property for me is going to be called Who Knows. And if you click on, I usually turn everything on just because I'm that sort of person. It won't hurt. But if you click on the KC up on that top left thing, that actually gives you an indication of the health of whatever's growing there. You can see up here on the left with the, when we had it off, the NDVI goes from brown, which is basically bare earth, up to the darkest green. And that's a little bit of an indicator of plant health, well, plant health and nitrogen, but the KC value is a really good indicator of plant health, and as well as water use. So once you've gone all the way around that, now if you find, I might go, well, I've got one here called Don't Know that I did for somebody else. I just, it's just a one. So if I decided I don't want that one anymore, I go into the My Fields one, drop down there, and if I want to break that up into different patches rather than leave it as the whole thing, I just click the Don't Know. Are you sure you don't? Yep. And I've just got rid of that one. So if I went to the Who Knows one, no, I've got two called Who. Yeah, I could do that, and then I could actually, if I wanted to, I could, if that was a young patch that went there, I could actually then take them out and do my individual patches rather than my whole property. Okay, so I hope you can all see some pretty greens, I hope they're green if we're back in March, some pretty green squares across your properties. Now
Can you show us how the sliders work?
Oh, okay. If you want these to be more or less intense, if you want to turn that one off up to 100%, that it follows this, that's how you work that one. So if you don't want to turn these on and off all the time, but I want to see what NDVI looks like, I just switch that one back. The clouds one means that now sometimes what we find is where the reflectance isn't good on a particular day, IrriSAT, so if I can go back down here, and IrriSAT will actually say that on that day, now that's showing that because the white covers there aren't very good at reflecting near infrared, it's actually showed up as clouds. And what we find is around work, or around our buildings at work, some days we get better reflectance than others. So if you put the clouds, if you've got that cloud ones on, if it's got a cloud patch over your property, so there was a cloud shadow when it went over, it will show up and take that out of your equation. Otherwise, as I said, all of these ones that you can see here are the cloud covers. Sorry, the vine covers for table grapes. All right, so that's how easy it is to set up. And as I said, if you decide you don't want that one anymore, I know whose that one is. Oops, sorry, I'm stealing Nat's thunder. But if I don't want that one anymore, and I know it's called Who Knows, you just go up to where it says My Fields and put it in the bin. And that's how easy it is to change them if you do make a mistake. All right, so that's how easy it is to set it up. And now I'm going, if anyone's got any questions, otherwise I'm going to hand back to Nat, and she's going to go through with you how you actually can get data that's specific to your property or your patch or whatever it is that you've just done. Everyone okay? Everyone got that going?
Yep.
I'm good, Max. I made it.
All right, well, I'm going to mute myself, which kills me. You'd all know that who know me.
Thanks, Max. So if you've all got your field, what you can do now is click on that field and you'll get a pop-up turn up showing a couple of graphs. So what you might notice well, something first to notice on mine is I've set my date for last week because we got no image this week. And you'll see that there's a bit of variation here. I've got small pixels and large pixels. This is just an example of how they've combined the two data sources to give us a full image where we might not have had one if we'd only used the Sentinel data, which is pretty clever. So we've got two graphs here. So our top graph is showing us our weekly crop coefficient values, which they calculate for the entire patch that you've selected. So you'll see this starts over on the right-hand side of our graph is today, and the data is going to extend all the way back to this time last year. So we get 12 months of data in this graph. So these are our weekly crop coefficients, sorry. This yellow bit behind is the field visibility. So you'll notice where it's dropped down these few weeks, we haven't got any crop coefficient values. They're coming up as zeros. And I'll show you a little bit later on how we can actually change them ourselves so that we will get some data there. On the bottom graph, we've got a daily crop water use. So they've taken, for my case, they've taken data from Silo, which is that gridded weather data that's calculated by CSIRO daily, and multiplied that by the weekly crop coefficient that IrriSAT's calculated. And it's given us this nice graph showing these blue dots are each day, and then the green behind is the cumulative water use up till today. So if you then click on the little arrow here, we come to the forecast page. So this is the ETO forecast from a program called Dark Sky for the coming week. This can be pretty handy if you're thinking about, particularly in the summer season, what we're looking for in the week in terms of irrigation. And it's also calculating crop water use based on the KC value that was most recently calculated by IrriSAT as well. And the same thing, the daily value.
Where did you get that graph from? Up there?
Sorry? Are we all good?
You get that graph by clicking on your property. So if you click in the middle of your property, that graph will come up.
So Nick wants to know, where do you source the ETO figures from?
So
where are they generated? They come from there.
So there's two places you can get these ETO figures from. On this main screen, they can come from Silo, which is CSIRO data, which is they take weather station data and then smooth it out over the entire country in a 5 by 5 kilometer grid. Or you can have it set to your nearest weather station, which I'll show you how to do. That's in the settings tab. And for some places, unfortunately not this area, you have a choice of maybe 2 or 3 different weather stations, and you could pick the one that's most representative for you, but it takes the ETO values from those places. And the forecast ETO comes from a website called Dark Sky. So we've got those two tabs are our first ones. Our next tab is the raindrop, which is called Apply Water. I'll show you a bit more how to use this in a minute, but basically this is a place where we can track irrigation. So it allows you to put in your irrigation for a particular date. So you can scroll backwards and forwards by just clicking and dragging. And then you simply type in a value. Let's just say 20, press apply. and it's added some water, and you'll notice this little change in the cumulative daily water balance down here. So what it's actually doing is tracking from the start date of the graph to now where our soil water deficit is at and what the crop has used based on what IrriSAT has calculated. So this could be a good way, if you are interested, to track your irrigation against what IrriSAT is proposing the crop water use is, and look at the soil water deficit. So if you'd like to have a go at chucking some numbers in there and see what happens, you're also able to put in rainfall data. So if you've set rainfall to a particular weather station or silo, it will automatically put rainfall data in there. But if you have your own information, which is more accurate for your site, then you can override it and put that in, or you can just tell IrriSAT, I don't want it to use the weather station data, I'm just going to put my own rainfall data in, and you can do that manually as well.
So Nat, it's Stuart here. That graph, before you put any irrigation in it, and for example, if you haven't got the rainfall thing set in it,
yep,
the crop water use just goes up based on what IrriSAT is saying that green crop has used, and
yep,
therefore the soil water deficit will just keep going down. The soil isn't actually that dry, but it's just calculating that, well, if the crop's used that much and there's been no irrigation that I know of that's gone on, then the soil must have dried out this much. So the red line heading down is, until you put an irrigation amount in it, is not real. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep.
Yep. All right, cool.
That's correct. Okay, so our next tab, there's the clock. This is the irrigation scheduler. I'm just going to switch over to my other field here.
Natalie?
Yes.
It's Kelvin Montague here. Can I just add a little comment to that question, that last comment? Is it an IrriSAT? You've got to remember that the crop water use is not under water stress. So if you've got anything that causes stress in your crop, it'll drop the water use. But basically, IrriSAT assumes that there's no stress. So you won't, because normally if your soil dries down, the crop will start closing down, stomata will close, and the water use will drop off. So basically, it's really only the crop water use calculation is only valid if you've got an unstressed water crop, so that you're irrigating frequently, etc. And there's no salinity, those sorts of things.
Yep. Thanks, Kelvin. So this little clock icon, if you're using the irrigation tracker, this one will give you advice on reaching a refill point, which you can set, and soil water deficit in the root zone if that's how you choose to use the program. And we can adjust these graphs down the bottom by clicking and dragging the toggles. And you'll notice that these are irrigation events that I've entered back here. The next tab with our little bars and our dot points is the seasonal report. So this tells you your rainfall information, irrigation, so that's the water that you've entered, the total water applied, so the sum of the two, the crop water use, so remembering that this is the average for your entire field and how from the calculation of crop health, which is the NDVI calculation, then converted to a KC value, and then the soil water deficit. So you'll notice these numbers are pretty low. That's because I've changed my season to just be a very short window for when I had input irrigation data. But we can change your fields in a second. And then our next little globe, This is just producing a map of your season's crop water use in megalitres per hectare. And then our final tab is the field settings. So our first piece of information is the category. This could be you categorizing specific crop types, specific varieties. It doesn't do very much except group like groups under my fields. So if I just wanted to put all of my vines under one thing, I could title them all vines and they would all come up under there. Then we have our field name, which you put in before. You can change that whenever you like. Remembering whenever you make a change, you need to press apply, otherwise it will not change. So next we have our reference ET. So this is where it's getting our ETO information. I have mine set to silo. You can choose nearest available source. For some areas, not here in Mildura, it might come up with 2 or 3 options of a specific source that it's taking information from and tell you how far away that is from your spot. And you can choose to use them as well. So stay with silo, click apply. And the same for rainfall. But you'll notice there's an additional option here, user defined. So that means that it won't put any rainfall data on automatically for you under the irrigation scheduling tracking section. So the next one we have is the planting date. Now you notice for this field, I've set a planting date for the 15th of September. So what the planting date does is it changes the start of the season, start of the irrigation season for you. So if you're looking to get a seasonal report on how much water IrriSAT's saying your crop is using, you might want to set this to the first irrigation of the year or at bud burst, whatever suits you. If you are using this water tracker to make your life easy, you could pick a date where you know your soil profile is full, so your soil water deficit is at 0. But if you have a guess or have an educated guess from using your soil moisture probes at what your deficit might be, you can actually change that as well back in the settings, which is this initial soil water deficit, the ISWD section, and you can tell it 10 millimeters, for example. And then if we go back to the apply water, you'll notice that it's dropped it down to where I said the deficit was at the start. So if you would like to change your data to your graph to the planting date, go ahead and select when bud burst was, or the start of your irrigation season, and click apply, and then go back and have a look at how that changed your first graph.
What would you use as interest?
I just go financial year, 30th of June. It's the easiest way.
Yeah, because that's a change in the irrigation season anyway. So.
So if you change your planting date, that will change where your values start, but it will end on today. So if you wanted to change that to your harvest date, that's what the next section gives us the opportunity to do. And this just gives you some control over where you want your information, what time of year you want your information to come from. You might only want the information for the summer period, for example, if that's what you wanted to look at. Or you might want to look at how much water was used by the crop last season or the season before. Since we have data that goes all the way back to 2000, you can do that if you like and have a look at how that's been changing over time. I've already mentioned what the initial soil water deficit is. Yep, that was just changing where the soil water deficit was on that water tracking graph. The refill point is the refill point that you would use based on your readily available water. And then the final one is share with. So if you decide you'd like to share your field with someone else to have a look at what's happening, you can type in their email address, their Google email address, mind you, so it has to be an account which is used with IrriSAT. Press add, and then you can share it with other people and give them the option to view it or edit the field as they choose. So the final thing I just want to show you is if you're looking at a seasonal report for KC using these KC values that we've got throughout the year, you'll notice that there's times where there's no information or information that seems a bit funny. So this point here doesn't seem to be following the trend of the rest of the readings that we're seeing in the weeks prior to and after. And this was actually when we had all of those dust storms. So when the satellites were coming overhead, it's seeing a lot of particles in the air and a lot of dust. So it can't actually get an effective reading of what the vegetation is looking like. So it was artificially, well, it was what it was seeing, but getting lower values than what was probably actually happening with our plant. So for the purposes of a seasonal report, if that's what you want, we can actually change this by clicking the edit button and then clicking on the blue dot that you'd like to change. So it's saying that it observed a KC value of 0.503, and the week before it was getting a 0.64, and then 2 weeks after 0.58. So this is a little bit unusual. So I might change this to a 0.59 and then click apply. And you'll notice that it changes in the top graph and the week's values in this bottom graph. So it'll change your cumulative water use as well. And if you decide you don't want it to be like that, just click revert. It'll take you back to what the satellite observed, and then just press done when you're finished. So that's a quick rundown of the different tools that you can use in IrriSAT. If you want to know more about how to use them in a little bit and have that detail, it's in that guide that was sent out to you. They step by step go through how to use each of those tools. Does anyone have any questions about that?
Natalie, I have a question. When I look at the global,
yep.
I see a dark blue colour saying that this patch of citrus is using 10 megalitres. Mm-hmm. If I would like to work on an annual use of, say, 8 megalitres, is there any way that the crop coefficients can be modified to achieve that?
I mean, you could go back and modify all of the crop coefficients if you wanted to, but just because this is what IrriSAT is observing, this might not be exactly what is happening on your property. This is just another source of information to look into.
Don't place too much emphasis on just that one color graph.
Yeah, I wouldn't place too much on that.
Okay.
But it can be a good way to, look back at your season and think, well, what have I done and what's it saying the crop's using, and kind of see where that lines up. Stephen probably will be able to tell you a little bit more in his presentation about how he's used it in that way. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll pass over to you then, Stephen, and you can Take us
Right,
through yours.
I'll hopefully I can share my presentation. Righto, can everyone see that? Hopefully.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet, Stephen.
No,
Ah,
hasn't changed.
Nat, do you need to stop sharing first?
Yep, I'll stop sharing.
Try it again, Stephen.
right. How's that?
No, not yet. Is there still a start share, another start sharing button there somewhere up the top?
Not seem to be having much luck here. I'll try again.
Yep, start from scratch.
Still no luck. I can
Not
see
yet,
it perfectly.
So when you go through the process, Steve, just take it step by step. You hit the button in the bar with the arrow up. You then choose the screen.
Yep.
And then there is another button to say start sharing.
Ah, righto.
There we go. Beautiful.
Lovely. Okay. So hopefully you've got a quick image there of an IrriSAT image of our property. It says IrriSAT 2020.
Correct.
Righto. Yeah, well, I started using IrriSAT about 3 years ago after a conversation with Jeremy Giddings at a wine grape growers conference, which I randomly decided to attend, and we're having a cup of coffee between sessions, and he mentioned this thing called IrriSAT, and it uses satellite data to look at crop factors over anywhere in the world. So I raced home and tried it out, and I've been playing with it ever since. I guess I find that it's, to be honest, a lot of fun, and it costs nothing, which are two of the main reasons why I use it, I guess. And I think it's a good introduction to spatial data management, where you can see in real time what's happening from above your property. And I think it'll be an example of some of the future systems that we'll be using to manage our properties. You can look at the data from anywhere in the world because it's a cloud-based system. So if you happen to be in Adelaide or Melbourne or New York or somewhere and you want to know what's going on with your property, you can quickly log in and see what's happening. It's made me think a lot more about crop water use, and I'll probably understand irrigation a lot better having just played around with this program without really I mean, I did know a lot but this has sort of consolidated a lot of the concepts. It's a highly automated system, which is a big saving. You don't have to worry about looking up weather data and that sort of thing. That's all done automatically. The only, I guess, labour-intensive side of it is inputting irrigation events, but you just need to be in the habit of doing that. And once you do it, it's not too bad. And I find you can use it to quantify the effect of a lot of vineyard operations, such as slashing and weediciding and topping. It's nice to be able to look back and actually quantify the effect that you're having and seeing that you're actually doing something that's useful. And it's for us, it's taken some of the guesswork out of irrigation scheduling, because we obviously we had a lot of experience, but we didn't have any irrigation scheduling equipment in the ground, apart from our experience and a little auger that we used to dig down and see how moist the soil is. But this, when we go to order water every time, we didn't have to take pot shots and guesses at how much water we needed to apply. As I'll hopefully demonstrate soon, it's good for comparing one season to another. And there's about 20 years of data in IrriSAT that you can look back on. So I was looking back last night at some patches of ours back in 2001, I think, or 2000, I think the data starts. So that can be interesting to look back on as well. I actually do use IrriSAT for irrigation scheduling. It's not, I don't rely on it 100%. You've got to use a bit of gut feeling experience as well. I look at it for monitoring crop health. It's handy for record keeping because it's a semi-automated system. You can keep an eye on what's going on. And for benchmarking, and I'll show a bit of that as well. And I guess included in all those four things, you're also along the way monitoring your crop water use and monitoring your vineyard management. So for the purposes of this presentation, I'm spending a lot of time, or I'll be spending a lot of time talking about a particular patch of sunglow that we've got. And this patch of sunglow is used for the Dried Fruit Australia project's 10-tonne project, which is where we're looking at a few different patches around the area to see if what we can do to maximise the yields in these patches. So this particular patch also has a green brain moisture sensor in it. So and it'll be interesting to compare how the green brain compares to IrriSAT. But I guess the first thing I'll do is I'll demonstrate what you can do with IrriSAT without really doing anything at all. And that's probably, if you want to know how much water your crop's going to use over the next week, IrriSAT's a really good, quick way of doing a quick estimate. So this screen shows the patch in particular that we're looking at, which is this patch here with the red circle around it, or red line around it. There's 10 rows there of sunglow. It's about 2.5 hectares. And usually when I open up IrriSAT, the first thing I do is click on the patch and the crop use or the crop growth graph comes up. And that gives me a good way of tracking how things are going, if things are growing or slowing down, or or if there's any effect of weediciding or slashing, I can see that as well. So I've set my planting date as being usually the 1st of July. I have debated whether that's the right date to use, particularly given the vines don't actually start growing until bud burst, which is in mid-September, around about here. But you can see at the start of the season, during winter time, we obviously had a bit of weed growth there, which is generating a reasonably large crop factor. And then as bud bursts approach, we've got stuck into the slashing and weediciding and reduced that crop factor ready for bud burst, and making sure that any water we do apply is being used by the vines and not the weeds. Now, when you click on the patch and this little tab here comes up with the growth crop factors, the next tab gives you a very quick reference, as Nat has explained, about how much water the crop's going to use over the next week or so. So it gives you a forecast of the amount of ETO, amount of evapotranspiration, and then it gives you what crop factor it's using up here, and it just multiplies that crop factor by the ETO and gives you the daily crop use in millimetres. So if you click on the data button down here, another little spreadsheet will come up, and it gives you a quick reference to the amount of water that you're expected to use over that period of time, which is about 8 days or so. So typically we'll be on a Friday night, we'll say, well, we're going to water this weekend, how much we're going to put on. With our sprinklers in the middle of summer, it might be 30 or so millimetres, which is about 8 hours. So this is a quick way of seeing how much water you'll need to apply for the next week. And if we've got a lot of patches that are still on drip, like these Sunglow, you can see that looks like it's about 2 millimetres a day or 14 millimetres. So you might irrigate for 2 lots of 8 hours or something, or 3 lots of 4 hours, something like that. And then if everything's going reasonably well, this little dashboard shows you how many days you've got until you need to water next. I probably don't use this a real lot, but it's nice to know that you're in the green zone. So I've set the refill point for this patch at 22 millimetres, which I think is a bit of a guess, and some people have said it's a bit too much. Our soil can't hold that much water, but it seems to be working reasonably well. And you can see if things are going well, this this is showing the amount of water in the root zone, and you're hopefully keeping it in the blue line, which I can hardly see, but ideally you'd be keeping it within that blue line between 0 and -22. So that's, I guess, irrigation scheduling is a fairly major use that I use it for. But also monitoring crop vigour is a fairly important tool as well. Now this is also the patch of Sunglow, but this is not this year but last year, so from the 1st of July 2018, sorry about that, until this time last year. Similar thing, you can see there's a bit of weed growth there. We got rid of that, and then the vines started growing, crop factor is increasing, and then as the peak of summer hits, it starts to decrease. One thing I did notice is that last year the crop factors seem to be much higher than this year. I don't really know why, except that it seemed to be a difficult season between really hot weather, near record temperatures, and a lot of dust and smoky days. So that might have affected the physiology of the vine, I don't know. But as a result, last year, when you compare the overall water use last year, this particular patch of Sunglow, the crop water use was 925 millimetres. Now, if I compare that to this year, a similar thing, you can see that overall the line's a lot flatter. We still had growth in crop factor from bud burst from sort of mid-September-ish, but the crop factors never got anywhere near as high. I think it only got up to 0.5, whereas last year the crop factor peaked at 0.68, although that might be a bit of an anomaly, but generally the crop factors were much higher than they were this year. And as a result of that, the crop water use estimated by IrriSAT was only 762 millimetres, which is nearly 2 megs a hectare less. And I also saw that we put on 686 millimetres of irrigation, which was, to me, seems a little bit light. I probably might have preferred to see a bit more than that, although we probably had a bit more rain as well. But that's something I'll have to keep an eye on. You'll also notice that at the moment, the weed growth seems to be having a fairly big effect on the crop factor. So that's telling me we need to get stuck into getting rid of some weeds, because I don't want the weeds drying out the soil. And just back to record keeping, I have been inputting all the irrigation events for this particular patch of Sunglow. So this is just a screenshot of one of those bits of data that you get off IrriSAT. All these little bars are the irrigations that we put on, but they only represent in this bottom graph here, this top portion only represents this blue part. So you can see when we got into that real hot stage before Christmas, we were really pouring the water on. Then I did see we were bumping up around the 0, well, the 100% full point. So we did probably back off a little bit, and then it's come back down again. But it's sometimes you get to a point in the year and you think, oh, I wonder how much we were putting on last year, and it's good to refer back to the records that you've got. And again, as Nat said, this is the page where you input all the irrigation data, which can be a bit of a burden, but as long as you get into the habit of doing it, it's quite satisfying to look back on it, and you can look back on when you were irrigating last. I also, excuse me, luckily Lower Murray Water have got some pretty good telemetry now, and you can look back and see when the pumps are on, and that helps with upgrading irrigation. Just some more benchmarking information here. These are 2 patches of sultanas that we've got on our property. The patch on the left here is a patch of swing arm sultanas on Ramsay rootstock, but they're on drip irrigation. Patch on the right are swing arm sultanas on Ramsay rootstock, but they're on low level sprinklers. But you'll notice that the crop water use for this patch of sprinklers is a lot higher, 958 millimetres or 9.5 megs a hectare. I think that that's a function of just the high vigor that a particular patch has got as a result of the sprinklers, and also keeping weeds. There's more weed growth in that patch as well, so IrriSAT's picked that up and added to the crop water use. Probably, I will say that patch probably this year probably did grow a little bit more fruit. Unfortunately, it was probably a bit too much because the quality wasn't so good. But it just shows that the drip irrigation seems to control the vigor a bit more with sultanas, and that's I think that's probably a good thing. Just a bit more benchmarking here. Another advantage of IrriSAT is you can compare your own patches to that of your neighbours or other growers in the industry. So I've found a grower that's doing a pretty good job, and this is his data here on the left compared to ours. Crop water use is very similar, within a few millimetres. So the vigor is probably similar, and but I don't really know too much about this patch, except if I have a look at the crop growth data, I can see that after bud burst, he had a nice steady growth of crop factor on his, whereas with ours we were a little bit, it was nowhere near as nice as the bench or the grower I'm comparing to. So I need to get on the phone and have a chat to him about that and see whether that's irrigation or fertiliser, or he's obviously doing something a lot better than we are at bud burst in this particular patch. We've still got a reasonably good yield off this patch of pruners this year, but perhaps it's not as much as it could have been. Getting back to, well, just a bit more benchmarking. As I mentioned, this patch of Sunglow that is involved in this 10-tonne project has got a green brain soil moisture monitor in it. So what I've done is I've superimposed the IrriSAT soil water content or root zone content graph. I've superimposed the green brain soil moisture content graph on top. It's not an exact science here. I've sort of guessed it. I've just lined it up by eye in the horizontal axis, and I've just plotted on the vertical axis, just to show that the blips in these are the last irrigations that we did with this patch, and you can see that where we've irrigated shows up pretty clearly on the green brain, but it also shows up on the on IrriSAT. What was interesting to me is that the gradients at which they're drying out are reasonably similar. The only comment I would say is that IrriSAT seems to be showing that things might be drying out faster than what they actually are, where the irrigation soil moisture sensor is. So I thought that was good that the data between the two systems is comparable anyway. I mean, you've got to be careful because the green brain sensor is only a point source, whereas IrriSAT gives you a broad average of the entire patch. So what have I learned? Well, crop factors are a tricky thing, but it's a factor of the crop type, the variety, canopy size, weed growth, row spacing, and irrigation system. So you've got to be careful that you don't just look at a patch and jump to a conclusion about whether it's looking really healthy or not. You really got to know what's going on the ground. But and then comparing one patch to another, it's very important that you're comparing apples with apples. So you compare the same crop type or same variety to another. And as a result, crop water use is a function of all of the above. So it's really hit home to me how much harder we need to work at making sure we don't have weeds growing at the wrong time. And because IrriSAT picks up anything that it sees, the data is more accurate if you haven't got weeds growing there at all. So it's best if they're eliminated as much as possible. As far as getting more out of IrriSAT, I'll be continuing to use it. I think it's absolutely fantastic, and I've just gained more and more knowledge and experience from using it, and I hope to keep doing so. I think I'd love to get a drone, even if it was just taking a normal photo of the patches I was looking at with IrriSAT, just to compare what you're seeing visually with what the data from IrriSAT is saying. It would be also great if somehow we could automate the logging of irrigation events and make it fully automated. And with our green brain sensor this year, there's been a pressure sensor installed in the drip line, so that is automatically recording when the irrigations are on. So if you could integrate that sort of system into IrriSAT, well, that would make things even better. I thought about integrating it into a fertigation program where the crop factors and when to apply fertiliser can be used, and how much fertiliser to apply then can be used using crop factor information. I don't know, it might be interesting to think about that. I'd love to talk more with growers to compare what I'm seeing in real life with what the IrriSAT data is saying. It mightn't be, I'm a little bit hesitant to do that at the moment because you feel like you're spying a bit on everyone, but hopefully if you pick the right person and they understand that you're not trying to, you're trying to do the right thing by everyone, then be able to get more out of the whole system. And I guess leading on from that, it would be great if there would be a group of interested IrriSAT users get together, even through online meetings such as this, because just to have a quick catch up and compare data, so that when you've got any questions and you think you're the only person using it, it's always handy to have someone there to bounce ideas off and try and learn from what you're seeing. So that's the end of my presentation. I hope everyone's got something out of it. Thanks.
Thanks, Stephen. That was excellent. I'm just going to jump back here, and Max is going to for us.
Unmute, Max.
Max, we can't hear you.
That's the best way. Sorry, you were hiding behind my water bottle. Sorry, everyone. Okay, because I've only got one more little bit, and so that's after you've seen all of that. Now you can actually set up your own fields, do all of that. So you've seen how you can actually use IrriSAT to do some forecasting, to look backwards as well. It only does go 1 week ahead. So if you've got less water, you can't do your water budgeting with IrriSAT. That's not what it's for, but it just has a look. And if you have a look here, you can see all of this. This is a big almond thing, almond farm. And you can see that even though these are all treated exactly the same, you can see the variation across that. And this is another one. This is all grapevines. So again, near Robinvale. And with these guys, what they can do, they can actually go in, all right, if this is the same variety, there's obviously something going on with this. And it gives you a really good place to start if you want to go out and have a look at what's going on. The other thing that we've got people doing is if you're going to put scheduling equipment in, you're going to put green brain capacitance probes or whatever you're going to use, you have a look and you go, well, if I put my probe here, that's probably where my water use is going to be highest because it's the greenest. So, and depending on what you want to grow, you might actually move that probe so that it's more representative, because you can just fluke a spot and or just get a really growthy bit or a bit that's not so great, and then that's not representative of the whole property. Got someone else who doesn't have enough water to grow stuff over the whole property, so he's only going to put irrigation in over 3/4 of it. And we actually looked on IrriSAT to work out, and just with weed growth, we could say, well, this bit doesn't even grow weeds, so keep away from that one. We've had people that have gone out, we've looked on IrriSAT like this, and with this one, it is a soil variation, but we've been able to go out and go, might be this one here, and they've gone out there and found out that it's a start of, in the case I'm thinking of, it was mealybug. It had started in, in a panel of vines in this case, and they were actually able to go and target and go out and see what the problem was, because IrriSAT picks up a problem before you can see it with your eye. So they're the sorts of things that you can do. As Nat showed you earlier, it showed where laterals were too long and the bottom vines weren't getting water, so you can pick up irrigation problems, pest and disease, and soil variation. So she said, if you've got any questions, because we've been told we won't be going back into the office for at least till the end of June. We had a catch up today with our head honchos. If you want to talk to us about it and you've got a question that you don't, something comes to you over, it's got to be between, it can be a weekend, but try and limit that if you don't mind. But I know I'll answer my phone if it's within reach. There are our phone numbers. And when we do get back in the office, that's where you can grab us. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you've got something out of it.